Yeah, so before when I was doing my podcast, um, in 2021, I actually got ding for being too free speech.
Really?
And you want to know what my free speech was? You will laugh.
What was it?
Don't hire product managers if you need process managers.
What's the problem here?
Literally, someone said that. I am very vocal, and I was like, oh, geez. I got dinged by one of the companies I was working with. Um,
What?
and I'm like that. Whoever snitched was very petty. Uh,
Yeah,
it's just like, and you know when you say like free speech, and you're like, oh my God, what the hell did I say? And then when people ask me, so I'm like, when I start doing this podcast, I want to make sure it's candid. I want to make
sure.
sure it's truthful, but not be divisive. So that's why I stick to what stuff I can talk about is tech and
But that wasn't
technology.
a divisive statement.
Apparently, in the product world, it is.
Oh, goodness.
And we can talk more about this, but I would love to introduce you. So we have Tamour Khan. This person here has been in it at Intel for more than a decade. Um, he has also worked for fancy names such as PwC. And I can keep going back. And I came across his profile. I believe we connected. I connected with him. Great guy. I asked him to hop on a call, or he asked me to someone has someone to hop on a call. And I was like, I need to have him on the podcast. Super nice guy. A lot to learn from him. And so that's my introduction, Temur.
Thank you. Great to be
Hold
on.
on.
And thanks for having
Hold
me on
on.
this rainy, windy day. Good
Oh
day to
yeah.
be inside.
Oh, I'm too focused. Hold on. Yeah, you know what happens is this is kind of fun. I like when this happens. So what happens is like the camera sometimes resets. So it's
Oh,
like, but the beauty of this is it's candid. So when this stuff like this happen, people know exactly there are no edits. But yes, over to you.
yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I cut out there for a moment, but I was going to say it was very nice to meet you a couple of weeks ago, and I'm happy to be on the pod with you to have this conversation. I was also saying it's a perfect day to be indoors on this rainy, windy day in San Francisco.
Dude, like, is it me or that it's been raining more?
Oh, it has been. It's been, especially the last couple of winters. My wife and I have made it a point to get out of San Francisco as much as possible during the holidays.
Well, right now, like it's so in San Mateo right now, when I stepped outside, it was super windy.
Hmm.
So, and this I saw this guy cycling, and like he was, um way above my, I don't know how to describe, but like he was an older person, very old,
Hmm.
and he's cycling, and I'm like, wow, and he's doing it. The only thing I didn't understand why is he doing on a windy day because his cycle was like he was trying to balance up the wind and cycle at the same moment. It was really bad, like really bad. Like a dog was like barking. I don't know what was going on this morning. That's why I had to like run and then come back. But going to the thing, right? So I want to jump right in,
Sure.
Temur. So here's one thing. So you have been at Intel for the longest time, and I'll be very frank. A lot of people when they listen to such podcasts, they're always like, "How do you get in?" or "How do you work for a company like that?" But that's a different question. For you, it's like, how did you end up working for a company this long? Because we don't come across like folks who have been in a company for longer. I
Yeah.
take it someone who's been there for long. I personally feel like, oh my God, the company is doing something right. He's at the right place, right time. You've been there. It's hard to stick with a company longer time, and
Yeah.
it's in a positive sense. So
Yeah.
I guess some wherever you want to start off with, it's a very open-ended question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can talk you through that. So, kind of just going back to before Intel and how I even got here, it literally started out with a recruiter from Intel reaching out to me when I was living in Miami, and this recruiter reached out about a position that was within the marketing organization on working on Intel.com, and he mentioned that the position was in Portland, Oregon, and I initially didn't even respond because on LinkedIn, you get hit up by recruiters, and I had never even been to the state of Oregon, much less considered moving there. So I didn't respond, but he was very persistent and he reached out again. I did respond saying, "This sounds interesting, but I'm not sure about I would move to Portland, Oregon. So I'm not sure it's the right fit." And he said, "Well, we'd love to talk to you." And then, Intel has offices all over the place, so maybe there's some flexibility there. So I said, "Sure." And then so they flew me out to Oregon, and I spent 3 days there with where the hiring manager at the time, amazing person, made sure I had a good time in the state and in the city, in addition to the interviews. And kind of long story short, so I ended up joining. They moved me across the country. I told my hiring manager at the time, everyone I met at Intel at the beginning had been there for 10, 15, 25 years plus. And I was like, that's crazy. That's impossible. I'll be here for 2 to 3 years max. And I told her this.
Yeah.
And I'll, jump over to somewhere else, to a startup or something. And she was like, all right, great. Do whatever you want. Um, and then I started in Oregon, but quickly realized not that I didn't like Oregon, but I wanted to be in San Francisco. So after less than a year, I moved over to our San Francisco office. And, I started off as a IC, working on design UX for Intel.com, the template system and kind of the global patterns and styles. But then over time, after those 2 to 3 years, realized that A, it's a great company to work for. B, there's amazing people. But also
Hmm.
I was able to really kind of build up sort of the discipline around design and what UX can be at the
Yeah.
company. And so kind of just jumping ahead a little bit, but over time I was able to build up an organization that ultimately built Intel's global design system for all of our
Wow.
.com properties, built all of our .com standards used by all of our business units around the world, in every language, in every country, in every activation. And so over time, I was continuing to learn and grow and also make an impact. And all the while working for amazing people. That's one thing, I just got very fortunate, very lucky to work under an amazing VP, amazing leaders along the way that just kept it fun and interesting and gave me all the support that I needed, but also the freedom and flexibility to kind of grow. And so, what started out as 2 to 3 years max, I think after it was around the 5 or 6 year point again, where I was kind of thinking about leaving and then, you know, kind of was talking to staying. And then here I am a decade later and
Wow.
been a great ride.
I've never come across well, let me pause for a sec. I've only met two people or three people in my life who have been with the company all their life. Actually, one guy, he started as an intern in one of the companies I was working for, share this.
Mhm.
He started there. To date, he's still there. And now he's there, I think, SVP or something. And
Nice.
I'm like, oh my God. Or at small, relatively very smaller than Intel. And this another person I know, he worked for a startup, which it was, I think, his second job. He started there, the company got acquired, stayed there, and still there. And then he left recently. And
Uh-huh.
that's like, I think, 10-year journey of his. And when I look at that, I really envy. So I'm envying you right now because the beauty is that you've been in a company, not only that you had a huge impact, so you covered a few things, which is very interesting, and I would love for you to dive a bit more. For those who are emerging leaders, for those who are leaders, and I guess those who are, well, the third subject is very different. It goes into product a little bit, but someone like yourself, right? So. You mentioned the impact that you had, global design systems. For those who don't know or who are listening, you want to chime in a bit like what global design system is for like from the design perspective of things. But also like the impact that you had across, I think you mentioned it's like all of the Intel brands, internal, external systems, all of that stuff is huge. How does one who wants to be an emerging leader gets there, and someone in corporate America, someone in working in corporate. Um, so it's a two question, yeah, basically two questions. What is the global design system? Quickly explain them, and then like talk about how did you get there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I can touch on that, especially in my journey at Intel. So, for those that don't know, design system, just to maybe oversimplify a little bit, is more in, establishing a set of standards that bring together your brand and your sort of how you want to go to market, and establishing a library or a system that then applies to everything that you're going out to market with a system that covers not only your websites, but
Hmm.
maybe your events or print collateral or the badges on your buildings, or having a system that looks and feels like one company, not so that it's all the same. The idea is not to just
Yeah.
make it the same or blend, but having a foundation that can then scale across all the different needs that you have across the company and allow you to go to market faster, be more efficient, but also provide a better experience and be more consistent and uniform as you're going to market. I don't know if that's a dictionary definition, but that's kind of what it is for us.
That is actually right. So right now I'm at like I joined a company, Star Health startup,
Mhm.
and literally that is really important. Like you cannot have a Apple product with the Samsung website, or
Yep.
vice versa, right? Is that people are like, what the fuck
Right.
just happened, right? So,
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to look, it's not about making everything look the same
yeah.
because then everything gets lost and then washed away, but rather it should feel like you're in the same company. When you buy any Apple product, right? They're different
Yes.
products with different use cases and different experiences, but the box, the packaging, the way you get you on board, the
Yep.
experience in the store, you know you're dealing with Apple. You don't have to see an Apple logo to know it. And that's the way it should feel across all channels. And so, at Intel, when I go back to when I started, we were much more fragmented, especially in terms of our websites, just talking about one,
Hmm.
right? We had hundreds of microsites or different
Oh.
experiences that had been designed by different agencies, different internal teams, and at different time frames throughout the, many years, and working towards we knew we had a problem, right? But there wasn't a centralized function tackling this issue. We had a lot of sort of governance activities around trying to eliminate microsites and things like that. But if you don't build the tools and frameworks that those business units or product leaders need,
Hmm.
then they can't do their jobs. So, these guys are not trying to do the wrong thing. There was never a tool or a centralized process in place. And
Yeah.
so it was, in terms of how we got there and how others, I think, can get there is, you have to make sure that you start with a craft, and the craft is always important. You have to have beautiful, meticulous, thoughtful design, but you also have to think about the bigger picture,
Hmm.
the ROI, the why are you doing this, right? There's always, and I come across this, especially with, designers, junior designers, creatives who don't want to be stifled, right? You have to strike this balance between building a system that is scalable and provides that uniformity across the company, especially for senior leadership. If I want to get a product lead or a senior leader in Japan to buy into a design system and not have their own agency doing whatever they want, it has to answer that, like, why? What is it in this for me? Is it going to limit me in any way, or is it going to empower me to do more and reach my customers faster, better, et cetera? So on the one side, there's kind of that, getting buy-in across the organization and senior leaders on why we're doing this and why it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And then the other side, making sure that designers within our product groups or around the world don't feel like we've stifled their creativity and we're locked them into, some Figma libraries that they have to
Yeah.
adhere and cannot go
So,
outside.
so what were we like? So back, I guess this is early 2000s. I'm trying to remember, or not
This would
early,
be
2010s. What would you say? Early 2010s, right?
I would say this particular like journey to getting to this point would start maybe like 2018-ish,
Oh,
20.
2018. So
Mhm.
before that, there wasn't much of a concept. Like there was a concept of design, but not.
Not what it is today. Yeah.
Yeah, like before it wasn't like you have these components which were there, but they were mostly on the engineering side.
Right. Absolutely. They were more on the engineering side. And it wasn't necessarily defined the way I would define a design system,
Yeah.
but the work was the same, right? Defining all of the patterns, a global navigation system, a global, it's getting very tactical, right? But the way we tabs and
Yep.
cards and all the different elements of a product or a web page show up, right? Having a consistent way of doing that and having a library that anyone can easily adopt and customize to some
Yeah.
degree as needed, but then roll out quickly and not have to recode or redesign everything from scratch.
And I think like now when we look at it, what you're defining like, hey, building that uniformity, I think every company now has like the first thing they do is build design systems. And what's beauty is, and tell me if this is the same for Intel or I guess among your peers, is are you seeing the branding guidelines, branding is also now coming towards going away from marketing and coming more towards product design? So I'm sharing this because at my last this gig that I'm doing right now, and previously I think it came to like design, then went to marketing, and then it came back to design. So it was like that. Um, I don't know. Why do you think that's happening? Number one. Number two, have you been seeing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Short answer, I would say absolutely yes. I think, I'm kind of thinking out loud here. I think just there's been a shift, certainly at Intel, but I think a lot of tech companies to be much more, have the products lead the brand and be product led in terms of how they go to market versus the other way around, traditionally thinking about exhaustive brand ID and brand
Yeah.
documentation, goes through all the sort of abstract ways the brand can go to life. And then there's a layer of like, okay, how do we apply this to our products, right? And maybe turning that on its head and starting
Yeah.
with the product and how designing the best possible branding for that product, the audience, how it's going to go to market. Our gaming platforms and gaming audience is a great example where, Intel puts on these amazing in-person events for gamers and then builds, does sweepstakes and partnerships with with retailers like Best Buy, et cetera. And the whole look and feel of that is all tailored to maybe an event or a particular activation. But
Hmm.
that is what ends up defining sort of the brand palette and assets for that audience. And so it's much more sort of product and audience led rather than I think how it traditionally was done.
Like I think what I've seen also is like it has now also become like more backwards. So the branding comes later at times.
Mhm.
And these are like companies who are like going back and forth. Like they know what they are, but they don't know what they really are, like in terms of brand presence. And so what I've noticed is like they're always sometimes looking at product, designing it first, and then going further with branding. So that's something very interesting. But another question I have, so you did mention like how you got in terms of like like I want to mention like emerging leader, and if you can double down. So you started as a lead, or what was your first role when you started at Intel? Yes.
I was, I guess, senior designer or lead
Yeah.
designer.
So you started as lead. How did you emerge for those designers who are looking into, becoming a leader? They want to start managing people or at least mentoring. That's actually the first step. How do you get there as an emerging leader? What were some best practices or mistakes that you learned, because we always take like the best practices, but like they're always incomplete without mistakes. I've done many of those as well. So like what, I guess, any walkthrough guide for those folks?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, in many cases, maybe this sounds a little cliche, but you kind of start to do the role that you're trying to work towards, right?
Yeah.
Before you're actually in that position. There's always an opportunity to coach and mentor others, to provide guidance that goes beyond your role, whether it's in design, research, front-end development, anything in this discipline. There's also uh, really understanding sort of what are the pain points for your leadership that you're working
Hmm.
in as a
Yeah.
company. Points could be around the craft and not having, a design system or true polish around a design, or it could be more operational. Maybe there's a lot of outsourced work that is expensive, right? Maybe there's a case that could be made for elevating design, and this is kind of where a lot of my work tap in terms of, at the start we had an internal team, but also a lot of work done with agencies externally, especially on the marketing side. And so understanding those pain points and being able to articulate them in terms of this is more expensive than it should be. The quality is not there because, you
Yeah.
know, in-house work, you have much more sort of a vested interest, et cetera. And building that case to, in my case, build up a team and really elevate and centralize the function was a huge step. And then just, being able to communicate and articulate that sort of vision that you come up with at
Yeah.
any level, right? The most junior person can identify a gap, identify a pain point, put together a right case around it if they truly understand the business and, going beyond just the day-to-day working in Figma, but
Yeah.
understanding how you fit in, understanding those pain points, and then, find that decision maker that can help push it
No,
along.
and I like what you're saying because I think a lot of designers sometimes miss that. So I've had like some folks, and tell me if that's true. They would just like be like, "Hey, I want to start managing people." And it's not a cliche that it's not actually a cliche what you're saying. You want to dress up for what you want to be. So you want to start acting like that because there's this perceived notion that, hey, if I get promoted, then I do it. I don't want to do more. It's like, no, it's like if you need the hiring manager or your manager needs to see the promise of, hey, if I go bullish on you to promote you, can you do this? And the
Mhm.
best case is, hey man, this person is already doing it. Might as well just put him here. Makes my job easier, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, truly, just from a operational standpoint, especially at almost any big company,
Yeah.
your manager has to really kind of go outside out of their way to prioritize a promotion for you. So you
Hmm.
have to already show them that you can do it. They cannot
Yeah.
take that risk on you that this person's been here for a while and they've never done this managerial role, type of role, but I'm going to promote them and see what happens. Like that, it doesn't work
And,
that way.
and so changing something when I want to ask you this. So product management,
Mhm.
product design. Now this will be an open forum conversation. I think product management got very bloated. So much bloated that we saw a lot of, people getting impacted. 2022, 3, 4, probably 25. The ratio of PMs to engineers have even reduced. So there's like one PM with like 10 engineers right now. Or even actually more. I may be wrong. So it's probably that number. However, the design has become very much more equal. So it's
Mhm.
like if there are like 10 engineers, there's 7 designers. Kind of like again, I'm talking about like in the company, but of course, like for one product line, there's a one designer or 2 designers, and you have 4 engineers, and the PM is shared across different products. It's
Mhm.
not even one PM per product, unless like I don't know, you're maybe Apple Music's,
Mhm.
PM. That's a different story because even within them you can have multiple PMs, but it's a different story. Um, and I'm also seeing, Tamour, is design-led initiatives. Companies
Mhm.
are prioritizing that. They're like, PMs are great. Yeah, love the hypothesis. Can we go back and start from backwards? So design first,
Mhm.
experiences. My take is, and this is a hot take, and I want to start the conversation with you.
Sure.
I think the future lies with product design now owning the product experience, all in all. That means get down to the numbers if you need to, or have the PM report to the product designers. The product designer jots down, specs out the experience of what the customer centricness could
Yeah.
be, which reduces time to execution. Again, because visually, we like I don't know about you, but like I need to be very visual when I'm talking or presenting. Writing doesn't translate that well for a lot of mostly people. Again, that's my hot take. What do you think? And what are your perspectives?
Yeah, I mean I think I would largely agree with what you're saying. I think, the role of product management is I mean a critical role, absolutely. And I don't want to piss off any PMs out there. I'm not the I don't necessarily agree with like Brian Chesky with right eliminating the PM role across.
Yeah.
I mean, who am I to question Brian Chesky? But what works for them, I think, doesn't wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily work in every organization. But to your point, the ratio is critical, and I don't know what the right number is, but it's critical to have that person, whether it's a PM defined as a PM or different companies kind of do it a little bit differently, I think, or
Mhm.
evolving there. But there needs to be someone who's like that sort of mini like CEO of this product that is pulling together the different functions. Because design, as much as we feel like we are, you know, the sun and everything over to Earth,
Yeah.
like there are other critical roles as well, right? This we have to make sure our sales team and frontline, folks that are truly customer facing
Hmm.
absolutely have what they need and are empowered. And sure, a designer could work directly with sales leaders, but there might be a more optimal way to kind of distill what's coming in from sales and from the frontline folks into what what the design team needs to do. And then same with engineering and in other disciplines. And so I think, yes, the ratio I think is probably off in some places or way off in some companies and has maybe gotten bloated
Yeah.
on one side. But the role is of I think critical. And
Would would you say like while the role is critical, I do agree, but it's like design-led companies. It's like Airbnb as you brought it in, right? So Airbnb is very design-led. All their research, they work with the sales team. The PMs are there like a facilitator, most likely. I don't know. I've never spoken to any Airbnb employee. If you have, let me know because I haven't.
Mhm.
Um, but my my first principles thinking is visually people can understand problems and challenges and solution better. Designers can translate that. PMs can facilitate gathering the requirements and leave it up to the solution crafting to the design team to make a
Yeah,
design led. So the hierarchy, if it's like product here, it's more like design at the core because you're experiencing, you're designing a whole experience, just like Zoom or anything that we're doing. PM is kind of like reporting, just like more like engineer versus the other way around. And so that's my hypothesis because what happens is like in my opinion, like sometimes product people they just come and they like ship, 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 ship
mhm.
because revenue, revenue. And while they will increase revenue, I'm 100% sure they're leaking it somewhere else. And so that always is the case. And then you have created this weird stuff which looks like an alien, or
Yeah.
I don't even define it. Again, and the reason I'm asking is because you've been in a huge org, you've been in a basically when I say corporate America, Intel does comes to mind, right? So you've been here. So I'm just wondering, like, would you say or believe that could be a case that hey, maybe it's time to rethink how teams are structured as well. Like we don't need to do it that way, the way it has been.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that part. And I don't know what the right answer is because I think this
Yeah.
kind of varies across every company. But in terms of being more design led in terms as far as the actual product and the everything from onboarding to using a product to, you know, increasing engagement, things like that. I think those are places where designers and UX researchers should absolutely play a leading role in terms of like what the end user is seeing. But then, in terms of like who's, writing a brief, for example, whether it's
Yeah.
internal or for an external partner, I think maybe, that's where that PM role still comes in. But, that's like collaboration and maybe even owned and in our case, very much shared OKRs and KPIs around the performance, right? It's not just like we hand this off to PM and then like they're reporting up metrics to leadership. It's a shared responsibility and shared ownership or
Yeah.
accountability.
And one another question, which is now I'm pivoting to another subject.
Sure.
I think I bring it in all of my conversation. AI.
Hmm.
Sora is out, the OpenAI video maker, right? Um, OpenAI and all these other tools can code. They can code the design. I actually, with my friend, was doing a side project, DLize.ai, and I would upload my designs, ask it to use Tailwind and code. It worked. It was a fully finished product. Maybe the code wasn't that clean. I'm not gonna say it was super clean. It was probably a mess, but it worked. Nobody will tell you like, oh, it's broken. Um, what are you, or I guess, what are you seeing with design that would happen? Do you think designers would be in a place that coding will be really no code? Like it's been there, but it will
Yeah.
go bullish or very fast.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're taking a longer view on this, like it's hard
Hmm.
to say. It would be silly to say no, no way, that's impossible, right? I think in the short term, the way we're looking at it, both for our day-to-day work and also, you know, I think as a company, right, is sort of empowerment and integration into workflows or tools in a very organic way.
Hmm.
So, for example, the obvious use case and all over the place for AI is, chatbots and intelligent assistants, right? In a chat bubble interface. But really the way, we're really trying to push and look at AI integration is more things like Photoshop's generative fill, where
Yeah.
it's not doing your job for you, or it's not just a chat bubble, but it's actually an extension of the way you may have already been working with the tool, but
Yeah.
now with additional features that enable things that weren't really possible before, or were possible but would take too long, so you're not going to do
Yep.
it. Similar or like Intuit, right? With their TurboTax and QuickBooks and Credit Karma, all those tools that are, not sexy tools, right? Nobody loves doing their taxes, right? But people love to save money and get money
Yeah.
back from the government. And so incorporating AI into those features when you're doing your taxes or when you're logging into Credit Karma to check your credit score and
Yeah.
having true AI that then helps you maximize your tax return from the government and maximize all the different savings you can find and keep you legal and not getting audited. Things like that are like the magical things that where it's amazing and it's not just a chat bubble in the corner. So it kind of, I know that's not directly,
Yeah.
that's kind of how we're trying to think about AI within what we do, but also the products that we make.
I hope like one thing I would love to see is like, like in Figma, when you have these design systems made,
Mhm.
right now you still need an engineer.
Mhm.
There are some tools and plugin, but nothing that comes to my mind. I don't know if it comes, let me know because then I will use it. Um, it would be great that when we have a design system, a generative AI trained on Tailwind or certain library of CSS could then just build it. And then all you have is a engineer just making sure polishing up. That's missing. Maybe that's a company.
Maybe that's company.
But I think that is the kind of future that I'm hoping. But do you have a take on AI? You know how in product management the AI is leveraged like ChatPRD, GPTs, just throw any AI at this point. You can write a product documentation.
Mhm.
Uh, Engineers can code with Claude and so forth, and GPT is not even like fancy anymore. It's like I don't know how to figure it out. Oh, let me just GPT this. So you can
Mhm.
do SQL.
Sure.
Do you think there's a version of design that would happen? Like I know you will, and I also want to put it out one thing. In a long shot, possibly there's a future, but technically, would that be possible? Yes, but in a non-technical sense, I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in the short term, right? The repetitive tasks or sort of
Hmm.
lower level tasks, creating abstract backgrounds or
Yeah.
creating Sora-like videos where the details don't matter as much. It's more about, I'm creating a certain
Yeah.
background element or landscape where, the trees are not exactly like what they look like in Yosemite. It doesn't matter because it's just all those repetitive tasks, like, yeah, absolutely. There's obvious use cases, right, that many companies
Hmm.
are using. And even in, like from a design side, Figma's auto layout or
Yeah.
image generator tools. Um, like those are sort of no-brainer things, right? Going into the next step of code, right? Again, if you have a design system, you have obviously, your multi-device behavior, all that is very consistent and defined. I think there are definitely sort of those repetitive or lower level tasks that could um, get to a point where the code is good enough or great,
Yeah.
right? That's auto-generated. But then maybe that side of sort of creative technologist or pushing the boundaries on things that haven't been done yet really start to take more of a forefront and, are where the great developers of today and front end developers, kind of
Yeah.
shift to, and that could be more fun for them, right? And could lead to better outcomes for everybody if you automate the boring stuff, quote unquote, and focus on the new interesting work.
I like what you're saying, the boring stuff. So my friend and I, we believe in this, and today I think all the boring stuff will be
Yeah.
gone. Like
Hmm.
you don't want to do that. Like, but all the interesting stuff you want to do that. So I have a feeling that that might mean elimination of a lot more jobs than um we need. Again, it's a very different conversation.
Yeah.
Um, just going back to your career, so you talked about emerging leadership. You give your take on, product design and everything. As we entering the last few minutes of our podcast, um, I always ask all my guests, and more like, and I don't think I can do more justice. Like I need to, like I don't think I did justice based on your career because you have such a huge background. You've worked in a company, and it's hard to compress in like few minutes.
Sure.
Um, well, it's very hard. Like I'm sure you have like plenty of like interesting anecdotes. I guess what will be your takeaway for those who are stuck as a designer, meaning they're not excelling in their career, they're not going up to the next level, they're not getting executive presence, or thinking any sort of those things, or miscellaneous.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, some of it touches on what we were talking about earlier, right? In terms of, um, you know, putting yourself in that position where you're doing a lot of the tasks that you want to at that next level. The tactical bits are definitely around having a strong portfolio and maintaining it. That's one thing that can be very challenging, especially if you stay at a role for a long time like myself, like, keeping up on things like that. But you have to think about your personal brand, right? Across a portfolio, across even LinkedIn and, the other professional sources. So, I know that's very tactical and a lot of people do that, and that's not good. That alone obviously will not get you growing. Going back around to what I talked about earlier, and this applies not to just design, but any career where you want to advance, like really understand what is your manager worried about the most, right? What's keeping your manager or leader up at night, or what's on their OKRs with their leadership, right? And what are those tasks that you can take off their plate, ideally, right? Or at least empower them to make them look good. If you can make your boss look good, that's always a good thing, right? And if you can take on responsibility that you know that you can do, but it's on their plate, it's a great way to make an impact and stand out from, the broader team. Um, in my case, like I talked about earlier, there was a big focus on uh, sort of being able to prove the ROI and quality increase, quality in terms of our customer experience and our brand perception and all of those things. Being able to truly quantify that and convey that to anyone that will listen. Leaders in your immediate organization, but also your partner organizations. If you can get, if you report up into, a head of design, but you're supporting stakeholders in various product groups, right? You have those, hopefully have some relationships already where you can go to your product teams and say, hey, wouldn't it be nice if XYZ, right? And you can generate momentum that way, especially in a big company. Um, yeah, I can keep going, but
Yeah, yeah,
I,
no. This is good. This is good. I guess one question is, and I know I did say it last few minutes. I had like, if you, how would you say like, you did mention something, and I think a lot of young folks who are graduating, um, and they're doing their first job as a associate designer. That was like, hey, how do I climb up? What does it looks like? What advice would you have for them? Like, because you did mention as a overall, but you touched something. It's like, hey, uh, have an impact with sister orgs, not within your only orgs. Visibility matters. So as a manager, what I do, I try to make sure there's much more visibility for the individuals. If they do better, I'm doing better. If they don't do better, I'm not doing better. That's my philosophy and over communication. What recommendation would you have for the newbies who are starting, it's been a year for their career?
yeah, I mean, I think if you're truly in your first year of your career, you have to start by just being laser focused on the craft, gathering feedback from as many people as you can. Like, hopefully, you have a good manager, design leader that you're working under, but also your peers, everyone around you. You can
Hmm.
learn something from every single person, especially when you're first starting out, but through any
Yeah.
level of your career. And so those first couple of years have to be focused on the craft. If a designer wants to grow and be taken seriously both within the design org, but then also to go expand your scope to take on a team to be able to
Yeah.
mentor others, you first have to um, show that you can do it yourself. Because not only does that get you noticed by leadership, it also gets you the respect that you'll need from your peers to be a design leader.
Cool. No, this is actually good because um I have some folks that I'm managing, they're fairly new. And so I was like, you know what? It's also good. I have the same thoughts, but I was like, you know what? It's probably also good for the folks to listen to this as well, and also for them. So I'll probably tell them, hey, listen, this part of my podcast and so gonna
Mhm.
plug myself in. But no, thank you, Tamour, for joining the podcast, giving me your time. Definitely want to have you again.
Sure.
Further more discussion. And this next time, I want to make it even more technical discussions.
All right.
Uh, it'll be much more exciting and fun. This was like a warm-up session part one, I would say, for myself. But no, this is great to have you, man.
Yeah, no, very nice to chat. And now I'm going to go help my wife, who's a real estate agent here, go show some homes.
Oh yes, yes. Wait, is she real estate agent for San Francisco?
She's based in San Francisco. We're in San Francisco, but she works all over the Bay Area.
Nice.
So, anyone that needs to know, her name
So,
is
so, sorry, say it again, say it again.
her name is Nona Ehiai at
Okay.
Compass.
So, everybody, you know what to do. You're buying a house, renting, doing something, reach out to his wife.
Yeah.
No. Hey, why not? I think it's great to do that. But no, thank you, Taimur Khan, for joining. I really appreciate this one.
Yeah, nice chat. Talk to you later.